I increased my capital and credit limit every 120 days on average and took my limit from $15,000 all the way up to $29,000 in just 24 months. You know, with each increase, you feel that rush of excitement, knowing your credit profile is getting stronger and your score is climbing. Plus, with the higher limit, you've got way more breathing room. Your overall usage rate drops, which instantly boosts your credit score. And let's not forget the peace of mind that comes with having enough headroom to tackle those big purchases like home repairs and renovations without any stress. It's a total game changer. So coming up, I'll show you how I managed to get back-to-back increases in 1 month, the 5 major strategies that I use to grow my limit consistently, and how, believe it or not, the vast majority of my increases came after spending less than $300 per month. So stick with me, because what I'm about to share could change the way you approach Capital One for good. By the way, don't forget to download my free credit card pre-approval master list to find over 60 credit cards you can get pre-approved for without a hard credit pull whatsoever. All you have to do is hit the link below. So I first started my relationship with Capital One in 2019. At that time, I was beginning to pay more attention to my credit after years and years of just letting it drift without much thought. My FICO score had been slowly improving over the previous years, climbing from 650 to 690, but I didn't really grasp the significance of that progress. When Capital One approved me for the standard Quicksilver card, I was genuinely surprised to see a starting limit of $15,000. This was easily my highest limit at the time, and honestly, it felt like a big win. I remember thinking, wow, maybe my credit limit is finally going somewhere. I was definitely happy with the limit, but if I knew what I know now, I would have been so much more excited. And looking back, that $15,000 limit was a game changer, especially since my overall limit was so small at the time. It made a huge difference in my credit utilization ratio, which, as I later learned, was a key factor in boosting my credit profile. Back then, my mindset was all about chasing sign-up bonuses. I was in that phase where I wanted to get as many rewards as possible, so I was signing up for all these new cards left and right. After earning the Quicksilver sign-up bonus, I kind of shelved the card, not realizing the potential it had for long-term credit growth. And at the time, I didn't have a game plan for increasing my credit limit or even a clear understanding of how far I could take it. I was just completely oblivious to the struggles that others were going through with their own Quicksilver cards. People had been stuck with the same limit for years, or worse, never managed to increase it at all. If I had known that, I might have approached things a little differently from the start. But in those early days, I was just happy to have a $15,000 limit and didn't really think much beyond that. It took over 2 years before I saw my first credit limit increase with Capital One, and I'll be honest, I wasn't even expecting it when it happened. By March of 2022, I was getting a bit frustrated, thinking that maybe this was just as high as I could go. But something inside me decided to give it a shot, so I manually requested an increase. When I checked my account and saw that they had approved me for a $1,000 increase, bringing my limit all the way up to $16,000, I was honestly shocked. At that moment, I thought it was just dumb luck. Like I had somehow slipped through the cracks and gotten an increase by chance. What I didn't realize at the time was that about 90 days before I had made that request, I had made a single travel purchase for $411. Now looking back, I think that one transaction likely triggered the credit limit increase capability. You know, it's funny because I wasn't even trying to play the credit game at that point. I was just living my life. But that small step seemed to open a door I hadn't even noticed before. Even though I wasn't particularly motivated to push my limits higher back then, that moment planted a seed. Something in me started to shift, and I began to wonder just how far I could take this. After that first successful increase, it was like a switch flip. I realized that I had more control over my credit limit than I thought. Over the next 24 months, I go on to increase my credit limit another 7 times, averaging a new increase almost every 4 months. It felt like I was unlocking a new level each time, and with each step, I became more strategic about how I approached it. Now, to set the stage, here's what I was working with. I kept my credit usage rate under 10%. That's going to make sure I had plenty of breathing room on my cards. Every single increase was requested manually. I never waited for them to just hand it to me. I maintain a flawless 100% payment history thanks to autopay, which took the stress out of remembering due dates. My household income was always over $100,000 by this point. My oldest credit account was a solid 10 years old, giving me the foundation I needed. And here's how each increase unfolded. My second increase happened on July of 2022. My limit went from $16,000 to $17,000. My average monthly balance for those 3 months prior was $166, and my Experian FICO score at the time was 738. Now, just a month later in August of 2022, I discovered Capital One's secret product change page. I decided to switch from the Quicksilver card to the Venture X card. That move right there felt like stepping into the big leagues, and it set the tone for what was to come. So now my third increase happened in October of 2022. My limit went from $17,000 to $18,000. My average monthly balance for the 3 months prior was $100. And my Experian FICO score was 744. Then my fourth increase happened on August of 2023. That's when I went from 18,000 all the way up to 23,000. And my 3-month average before was $124, and my Experian FICO score was 793. Then the fifth increase happened on September of 2023. My limit went from 23,000 to 24,000, and my balance prior was $124. My Experian FICO score was 793. So essentially, I was able to increase my credit limit in back-to-back months, which I personally never seen anyone do with Capital One before. Then my sixth increase came on February of 2024. It went from $24,000 to $25,000. My average monthly balance was $233, and my Experian FICO score was 776. My seventh increase came on June of 2024. My limit went from $25,000 to $26,000, and my monthly average was $89, and my Experian FICO score was 772. And then my eighth increase came in August of 2024. My limit went from $26,000 all the way up to $29,000. And my average monthly balance was $5,568, and my Experian FICO score was 770. Now, you might notice that my monthly balance average really skyrocketed before that last increase. That's because I was knee deep in home renovations, and I had a massive first payment due to the general contractor. That payment was over $16,000 just to get started. Now, even though I had other cards with $20,000 limits, I felt a lot more comfortable using my Venture X card because I had more headroom to fit a transaction that large on. I made the purchase and paid it off within about 2 weeks, but before doing so, I called to speak with a customer service rep. Now, to my surprise, the rep was incredibly helpful and assuring me that the purchase would go through smoothly and that I didn't even need to call in the first place. It was clear to me at that point that the Venture X card came with a different level of customer service, which is really a nice bonus to see. When you break it all down though, the average time between each increase after the first one came out to be about 4.2 months per increase, and that's nearly an increase every 120 days. And I can't help but think that if I had been a little more aggressive and requested increases every month without hesitation, I might have shortened that average even further. Looking back, the credit limit increases did more than just boost my numbers. They completely transformed my financial flexibility and peace of mind for that matter. First off, having a higher limit made it so much easier to handle those larger purchases, like the cost that came with my home renovations. Instead of juggling multiple cards or worrying about maxing out, I could comfortably charge those big ticket items without a second thought. It was really a huge relief to know that I had the room to cover those expenses without straining my finances. But it wasn't just about making bigger purchases. The real game changer was the freedom from credit limit anxiety. No more stressing out about my credit score taking a hit when my transactions ran high for the month. With those higher limits, I could keep my usage rate low no matter what, which not only protected my credit score, but also gave me a sense of security, knowing I wasn't flirting with those dangerous utilization levels. And let's not forget the impact on my overall credit profile. Higher limits don't just help with the day-to-day, they make you look a lot more attractive to other banks. When I started applying for more personal cards and even business cards, those high limits on my Capital One account made a big difference. Other banks saw that I could handle those larger limits responsibly, which opened the door to getting even higher limits across the board. It's really like a snowball effect. Once you start building momentum, everything else starts falling into place. When I really look back on my journey with Capital One, I can see there are 5 major hacks that made all the difference. At the time, I didn't fully appreciate how these moves would impact my credit limit increases, but now I realize they were crucial. But first, I gotta give a big shout out to the Venture X card for making these hacks a lot more powerful. That's because it has some of the highest starting limits in the game, with some people hitting $10, $20, even $30,000 right out of the gate as a starting limit. And many of those people are doing that with very modest incomes. And did I mention that the minimum starting limit is $10,000? So that's the absolute floor. You'll never be given a limit under that. And you'll never be bucketed like Capital One's lower tier credit cards like the Quicksilver card. And with this metal Venture X card, you get 10x on flights, 5x on hotel and rental cars, plus it doubles as a catch-all card and earns 2x miles elsewhere. And of course, you know, I just hit my highest limit of $29,000 with the Venture X card too. So just hit the link below to learn more about how to apply for the Capital One Venture X card. Now back to Capital One. What I realize now is that I was in the minority of people who joined Capital One after already building decent credit. Most people think Capital One is a go-to option for rebuilding credit, and for good reason. They're well known for accepting people with bad to fair credit. But when I signed up for the Quicksilver card, I didn't know how much of a game changer my situation was. You see, when I applied, my FICO score had just climbed from below 650 to around 690, and that put me in a pretty solid spot. Capital One didn't throw me into their typical bucket for people with lower credit. They placed me in their excellent credit bucket. That allowed me to start off with a $15,000 limit, which was the highest that I'd ever had at that point. It also set me up for steady growth with increases of $1,000 or more each time, instead of the small $100 increases that many people are stuck with. I always say it's much better to end with Capital One than to start with Capital One. And here's why. They practice what the credit card industry calls the barbell strategy. Now, this means they focus heavily on two ends of the credit card spectrum. People with bad credit, like those who qualify for the Platinum card or the Quicksilver Secured card, and then those with excellent credit, like those who qualify for the Venture X card. There's really no middle ground with them. And because I started with good credit, I was able to avoid the trap of small limits, and instead I was on the path to much higher credit ceilings. The next hack I did was product changing into a higher tier card. And this is a strategy that many people overlook. This is great if you're looking to position yourself for multiple credit limit increases. When I product changed from the Quicksilver card to the Venture X card in August of 2022, it was a big moment, even though I didn't fully realize it at the time. The Venture X is a high tier travel card, and with that comes higher starting limits. For example, as a Visa Infinite card, the Venture X has a minimum credit limit of $10,000. And when I looked at over 120 credit limit increase data points across different credit card companies, the Venture X consistently came out on top for starting limits. People were consistently getting those $20,000 and even $30,000 starting limits right off the bat. When my account switched over from the Quicksilver to the Venture X, it was like the floodgates opened. Suddenly, I was seeing frequent multi-$1,000 increases, eventually pushing my limit all the way up to about $30,000 now. And the lesson here is, high-end cards lead to high-end limits. If you're stuck with lower tier cards, consider a product change. It could open up a world of possibilities. Next, credit usage will always be the #1 way to increase your credit limit. But here's the thing, you don't always need to spend big to see results. A card underwriter once told me that they like to see large transactions paired up with large paydowns, meaning they want the card to get heavy usage, but also be paid off by the end of the month. In my case, 7 out of the 8 increases were achieved with below $300 in usage on average, which is insanely low. The rule of thumb usually says you should spend 30% to even 50% of your credit limit to trigger an increase, but with Capital One, that simply wasn't necessary for me. It's possible to get away with using your Capital One card as a backup for occasional transactions and still grow your credit limit. So if you're someone who prefers to keep your spending low, don't even worry about it. You can still see big increases with light usage. And I can't stress this enough. If you want to increase your limit with Capital One or any bank, you have to ask manually. I hear many people talking about their luck with automatic increases, but that just wasn't the case for me. For every increase I got with Capital One, I had to speak up and ask for it through the app or through the website. With Capital One, every increase request is a soft credit pull too, so there's nothing to worry about there. I made it a habit to ask every 31 days or so after my statement cut, and it really paid off. Remember, it doesn't hurt to take a swing and see what you get, especially if you put some heavy spending on the card recently. When they ask you the reason for your request, I always chose the option that says you anticipate higher spending for the next few months. Banks really want to see that you're actually using the higher limit that they're giving you. And this reasoning gives them peace of mind that they'll get more swipe fees from your transactions. Additionally, raising your income and being able to report larger amounts in the income box will inevitably trigger banks to start you off with and end you off with higher credit limits. It's all about showing that you have the ability to pay off larger amounts of debt, provided your expenses are under control. Throughout my entire relationship with Capital One, my household income has always been north of $100,000, which I'm sure played a significant role in both my starting limit and my credit limit ceiling. In interviews with underwriters from large banks, they've always mentioned a few key things about credit limits. The primary way they set your credit limit is based on your yearly income. They don't usually verify your income directly, as it would take too much time and resources. Instead, they pay attention to supporting evidence, like other accounts on your credit report, to really gauge what you can afford. If your income isn't where you want it to be right now, and you've been counting only your personal income on applications, I strongly encourage you to include your household income in that calculation. You're well within your rights to do so, and it has such a positive effect on your credit limit. You know, the Card Act of 2009 allows individuals who are 21 years or older to include any income to which they have a reasonable expectation of access. This includes not only personal income, but also spousal income, partner income, and other forms of household income. And if you're asking what qualifies for household income, you're looking at spousal partner income. So that's going to be income earned by your spouse or domestic partner. That can be included if you have any reasonable access to it, assuming you share financial responsibilities within the same household. And then you have other shared income sources such as investment income, rental income, retirement benefits, or alimony can also be included. And in some cases, regular contributions from parents, family members, or roommates towards household expenses may be considered too, provided they are consistent and significant. Really adding in that household income into your credit card applications is a powerful strategy that can help you secure higher limits and better terms, so really don't overlook it. You know, just like we talked about earlier, underwriters are the ones who know exactly what it takes to get higher credit limits at banks. So definitely check out the next video where an underwriter from a top US bank gave 10 years worth of advice and insights into how large credit card issuers approve and deny applications and how they hand out credit limits. Thank you for watching.